As we heard, Canadian author Irshad Manji was targeted in Jakarta while promoting her book, Allah, Liberty and Love. She was accused by extremist Muslim groups of promoting homosexuality. The author spoke to our Indonesia correspondent, Helen Brown.
Irshad Manji, thank you very much for your time today.
My pleasure.
You're here in Indonesia to promote the book. What are some of the key themes of it?
The book is called Allah, Liberty and Love, the courage to reconcile faith and freedom. Those three words, Allah, liberty and love, typically don't find themselves in the same sentence. And I'm arguing in this book that they can go together, and not just in theory, but in reality. And indeed that Muslims, first and foremost, if we're going to legitimately call Islam a religion of peace, we have to start behaving as if we believe that. So reconciling Allah with freedom and love is the core mission of the book. And the unique thing I think about it is that it shows young Muslims especially, a new generation, how to live liberty and love while still being a Muslim. One of the questions that kept being brought to me from young Muslims around the world over the last 10 years is how do we go about developing the courage to speak our truths? Many asked, how do I deal with the backlash that I'll be getting from my community, just as you're getting from yours, Irshad? How do I cope with the accusation that I'll be dishonoring my family if I speak my truth to them? And you can see that these questions aren't about why should I care. They care. Young Muslims care. It's about how can we go forward with this message and live it. So this new book shows people of all faiths how to ditch the dogma and retain the core principles of love that are at the heart of every great religion.
It's a very big ask, though, to challenge religion and the strong cultural attachments that come with it. For instance, I've seen arguments that the word love doesn't appear in the Quran in the way that you've interpreted it. Right. And so you're coming up against some very strong undercurrents.
You know, I met with the head of security at the university where I teach, New York University, several months ago. And I told him that even though the new book has a benign title, Allah, Liberty and Love, I said to him, Chief, I think we are entering a new phase of violence that's going to be wrought here, because love, especially, is so threatening to those whose faith is insecure. And indeed, that is what's happening. Not only have my team and I experienced violence here in Indonesia, which used to be a model of pluralism and tolerance in the Muslim world, but also just a few months ago in the human rights haven of Amsterdam, where 22 jihadists stormed through the doors, raised their black flag, yelled takfir, which is their way of calling me a kafir or an apostate, and ordered my execution. And then right on the spot threatened to break my neck repeatedly. This doesn't happen out of the blue. So it is making people uncomfortable, but only those people who tend to grab the media spotlight, those who are quietly working to develop a personal relationship with their God, and to be good citizens, not just of their countries, but of the world, while remaining Muslim. This book is trying to reflect their voices.
Well, given that you've raised the issue of violence, you've come up against a backlash here in Indonesia. Can you tell us a bit about what's happened and whether you've been surprised by it?
Let me start with the surprise, because I was in Indonesia 4 years ago, releasing a book with the title Faith Without Fear. And this was a time when radical Islamists would come to my events and counter-argue. I even remember at the launch of the book 4 years ago here, both militant Islamists and transsexuals showed up, and everybody in between. 4 years later, peaceful dialogues with citizens who have chosen to be at my events get upended, not just by threats, but by militant Islamists showing up and wielding batons and smashing windows and rampaging to the point of even injuring one of my own team members. This is not the Indonesia that I know and love. And it's also not the Indonesia that a lot of people who live here recognize. In only 4 years' time, many things have disintegrated. And I think it is a reflection of the rising tide of fundamentalisms right around the world. So this is why a book like Allah, Liberty and Love is relevant for all people, not just for Muslims, because it makes the point that every human community, from Wall Street to Muslims, needs to have morally courageous individuals, people who are willing to speak truth to power within the community for a greater good, knowing that backlash will be coming their way. But that is the only way history has shown us that deep corruption is rooted out. Moral courage.
The idea has been raised that there's some kind of culture war occurring in Indonesia. It's a battle between conservatives and liberals. Is that how you would categorize it?
I believe that the more important distinction is between the mere moderates and the real reformists. And moderate Muslims are those who stay on the sidelines, who complain about the foreign policies of the US and Australia and Israel, who point fingers at so-called imperialism in the outside world and shut up about the abuses of power within their own communities. Those are mealy-mouthed moderates. Real reformists show up and they speak up and they point out that of the 5 fingers that God has given most of us on one hand, is there even one finger that we are willing to point at ourselves as Muslims? And that comes right out of the Quran, chapter 13, verse 11, which states, God does not change the condition of a people until they change what is inside themselves. I like to think of it, frankly, as a 1311 solution to a 9/11 kind of problem. So reformists very much speak from within the faith and acknowledge that we are not God, and therefore we have to recognize our imperfections too. That's the real culture war in this country, as it is in most countries, not just Muslim countries, most countries around the world where large Muslim communities, such as in Australia, exist. We need to be asking, where are the reformists and how can I ally with them?
Irshad Manji, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks and God bless.